I was like, what's simple enough that anybody can follow along? It's something simple, anything anybody can do in a small amount of time. So I picked up, and these are free patterns that I grabbed, and these are just for the bodices. So the first pattern, let's go with this one. The first, and these are printable patterns at home. And this first one is by a old internet PBS TV show called Jane So-and-So, in which they made a prom dress. So this is the bodice from that, plus the beginning of the skirt pieces from that. And I will do a small section on how to modify these, because the girl that these were for was a very small person. So us slightly larger people, we might need a small amount of modifications, but I do say start with the original patterns before we try to resize anything. The other pattern that I picked up, this is from an internet blog. I will post it down below. It's called It's So Easy, and I'll post pictures of what the It's So Easy pattern is and what the Jane So-and-So pattern is right up here. So if you notice, the It's So Easy pattern is actually just a shirt pattern. But what's a shirt but a shortened dress? So I will show you how to modify that. So you can use newspaper to help modify your patterns, or what I have wrapping paper from the Dollar Tree that I'm just going to use for that section of the video. But for the most part, we have what we need from both of these patterns is basically just the bodice, because the skirt is going to be simple and easy to do. So I started cutting out and assembling these pieces without the camera being on. So I'm just going to do a quick recap to let you know what's going on. So I've started with the every body bodice pattern. I got all the actual bodice pieces cut out here. And now I'm working on the skirt pieces. This skirt is designed so you can add as much length as you need. So it's not a full skirt pattern. It's just for the upper portion of the skirt that attaches to the bodice, to make sure that your skirt will appropriately attach to the bodice. Okay, so what I'm doing right now is I'm working on the skirt back, and unlike most PDF patterns, this one doesn't quite line up correctly. So most PDF patterns, you just basically put the blocks together like so, but this pattern, if you can tell, clearly doesn't do that. So that's why I wanted to jump on real quick to show you exactly how this all is. So if you notice, this kind of like the writing on either pattern lines up, and then they have these little, what do you call these? They have these little greater than, equal to signs in the center to make a diamond that would then need to overlap. And then you can also tell that they're in the correct position because the writing on the pattern will then overlap. And that's how this pattern goes together. When we get to the second pattern I'm going to show you, that is when you'll see what I was talking about with regular PDF patterns lining up equally. I will say, if you are willing to spend a couple extra bucks online, you can visit Etsy, you can visit Berta Style, where this pattern comes from. I will post links down below. And you can basically Frankenstein a pattern from there. If you are familiar with one modification of patterns, or you can use the same relative steps that I'm going to show you in this video to create what you need to create the patterns for what am I trying to say? So you can create the patterns that you need from any other pattern. But if you check on Etsy, you can find PDF patterns there that will be several different designs. I will put a few that I find appealing and relatively easy for the beginner sewer in the description bar. I'm really trying to give you as much information as possible. I think I might even try writing a very, very quick blog post about this whole process so that you can have as much information. Feel free to ask questions. While I'm not the most knowledgeable sewer, I will say I have been at this on and off for about 10 years now, if not a little bit longer. So yeah, it's been well over 10 years. So I do have a wealth of knowledge, and I'm trying to figure out what's the easiest stuff to share versus what's entirely too complicated for the average amateur sewer to understand. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish assembling all of these pieces, and then I will be back. So I have started to assemble the second pattern, and this is the difference I was talking about when I mentioned in the first pattern. In the first pattern, we had to match up pieces within the writing within the pieces. This pattern is different in the sense that they are all numbered in numerical order according to their place. It goes 4 wide and 4 down for each sheet. And so you just keep going around and you just line up the edges of each block in order to create our full piece. So I haven't taped any of this together yet, so I'm just going to pull a piece out so you can tell. So we can tell that this piece here lines up. Let me just by lining up the squares itself, and you'll notice this line here will match up. All these lines will match up. I have it slightly out of place. So all these lines will match up, and so will the wording. So this makes this type of pattern easier to put together than the previous pattern. So I'm just gonna go ahead, finish putting all this together, and then I will be back. So now that I have all my pattern pieces cut out, I did want to point out that this pattern here, I believe it's called the twist front top or halter. Anyway, this pattern here has 4 pieces and it comes in 3 different sizes. This pattern is meant for stretch fabrics, but I believe we can use this with something that doesn't stretch as much in order to make a bodice for a gown, simply by adding a zipper instead of allowing us to just stretch through it. For my bustier girls, I believe we'll just have to be a little less modest when we're sewing this up. So, or not, we can add a little bit more space in this onto this end in order to make this all come together. Both of these patterns have a 5/8 of an inch hem allowance. I'm sorry,
seam allowance. That's the word I'm looking for. So both of these patterns have a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance.